Hi, good evening. This is Randy Old, and we're trying something a little different today. We're going to be open to any questions you have about me. I'm going to be running for City Council, or I am in the middle of a campaign for running for City Council for Vero Beach, and I'd like to answer any questions you may have. In the meantime, for the next few minutes, I'm going to describe me and my background and why I'm running, and give you a little background about some of the major issues. And then as questions come in, I'll be glad to answer them as best I can from my point of view, obviously. I'm 74 years old. I was born in Washington, D.C., lived most of my life in Concord, Massachusetts. I've been married to my wife, Jody, for 51 years. We've got 3 kids, 5 grandchildren, and lived here in Vero Beach year-round since '08. I first came here in 1966 to ask for my wife's father's permission to marry my wife, and we've been coming ever since 1966, but just seasonally, and so we didn't really know Vero so well. Now, once you get involved in the city, you end up knowing a lot more about the city than you previously did. I decided to get involved in politics about 4 years ago, and was on the Finance Commission. And the Finance Commission was interesting to me, and some people said, "Why don't you run for City Council?" And at the time, I said yes, I would do it. I really didn't know much about the city at all. For instance, I didn't know that the city had 5 businesses. I didn't know the size of the city's budget. I didn't know the size of and what each one of the businesses were that the city did. So it was an interesting sort of plunge into political life. I really didn't know what I was getting into. As I got interested in it, and I was on the Finance Commission, I was able to avail myself of all the managers and stuff of the different departments. So, the biggest issue has always been the electric, and so rather than say I didn't really understand about the electric, I decided that I better talk to people about it so that I understood it, and I at least got my hands around the major parts of it. So as I was campaigning, I talked to Amy Brunges, who runs Florida Power and Light in this area. She talked to me about Florida Power and Light's viewpoint of the sale and the electric business. I went with Pilar Turner up to FMPA and learned about FMPA to some degree. I met with the management up there and spent time with them for a few hours. I spent time with Tom Richards, who was running the utility here. He answered a lot of questions. I spent an awful lot of time collecting documents and reading about the history of the electric business, and sort of got my hands around it. Didn't really understand everything, and it's a very complicated thing to get your hands around. So I did as best I could by myself to try to figure out what it was all about, and that really has helped me a lot. Once I got involved in the City Council, I went on to the board of FMPA and spent a year on the board of FMPA, which was very interesting to me. The board of directors has all the power of FMPA. They make all the decisions, and I was one of the people that helped make the decisions. And during that process, you learn how complicated the business is, and it's something that I didn't know anything about. I don't have a utility background. I'll tell you about my background in a minute. I don't have a utility background, and picking up and helping run either FMPA, which is a $750 million business, or Vero Electric, which is a business of about $100 million. It's very difficult for a city council person to basically, for me, leave the golf course and come in and try to run a business like this. Very difficult transition. So it takes an awful lot to get involved. My background is finance, and so I'm used to reading audits. Each one of the people that I lent money to, or I was with Chase Bank, each one of the people I lent money to was a large company, and they had an audit, so I was used to reading audits. I read the audit of FMPA and didn't understand it to the degree that I'd like to. It's very complicated, and so I spent maybe 25 hours with the CFO of FMPA, getting to the point where I understood the operation of FMPA, and it's a very complicated thing, and I got my hands around it as best I could, but I don't think it's something. The electric business is something that I don't feel that we should be running. I think it was too complicated. At the time that I got involved in it, it was for sale. Our electric business was for sale. Florida Power and Light had offered just under $200 million for it, and FMPA had said basically that it would cost $350 million to $400 million for us to exit FMPA. So we would lose money on the transaction, and so that the idea of being able to get out from under FMPA and OUC and exit the whole electric business, at the time I first got into the city council, was a non-starter. It was something that we couldn't really do. So I was looking around for some way for us to not have the obligation to manage it, that we could bring in a management company or somebody that helped us run something that was too complicated for a city council to run. And that was my first idea about what to do with the Vero Electric. Prior to that, I thought it was a really great idea to have an electric business, because our income from it was about $6 million a year, and that really helped our general fund itself. I mean, it funded more than property taxes did, and so it was a real boon to our little budget for the city. Anyway, let me go back in my background a little bit. I'm originally from Massachusetts. I was in the Army. I was a Japanese linguist in the Army. I went to the University of North Carolina. I majored in political science, had 4 years of Chinese in college. Chase hired me, and I went to the Far East. After a training program in New York for a couple of years, a management training program, we ended up with my family in Singapore, where I dealt with petroleum companies, exploration, refining, that sort of thing. And then after that, I went to Tokyo, lent money to international Japanese companies, and then ended up going back to New York. In New York, I went through a training program again, refresher course kind of on how to lend, and how to read financial statements and that sort of thing that's always changing and always improving. At the end of that course, I was part of a task force that went to the Middle East and looked for. Actually, at that time in the Middle East, there was the oil prices had gone up a great deal, and so there was a tremendous amount of money in the Middle East. And Chase was looking to figure out where they wanted to open branches. So a group of us ended up in Beirut for about a month. And we were dispersed to different countries, which we studied and looked to see if Chase should open a branch in them. I went to Jordan and was studying to try to figure out whether Chase ought to open a branch in Jordan. I came back to the group in Beirut and said, yes, we ought to open one. And they said, okay, if you feel you ought to open it, then why don't you go and do it? And so my family, 3 kids and wife, moved to Jordan, and we opened a branch of Chase there. That was in 1975, a long time ago, when I was younger. Chase and I parted ways after a while. I bought a company with 2 Jordanians that took care of American Express credit cards in the Middle East, in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. And did that for a while, sold it, and did some consulting work for Midwest banks. I set up a London office for a Minneapolis bank, which made me I learned a lot from it. I went throughout Africa doing political risk economic studies on the countries that are there, and then recommended to Minneapolis Bank where they should do business and where they shouldn't, and then took them around, took their executives around to different countries and introduced them to businessmen and politicians in each one of the countries, which was, excuse me, which was a lot of fun, actually. It was work, but it was a lot of fun. And then my family and I moved back to the States, and since then I've been closing a bank that had a lot of fraud in it. That was a Jordanian bank that was set up in Washington. So I've been running around sort of trying to collect money that was owed to the central bank under the supervision of the Federal Reserve. And that's kind of where my sort of career ended. I then moved down here in '08 and been living happily in Vero Beach ever since. It's a wonderful community. The more I'm here, the more interesting people I meet, and with almost any kind of industry you want to learn about or any kind of subjects you want to get into, there's somebody here that's really good at it and really knowledgeable about it that you can sort of check around and look for and discover that's really a lot of fun. Here I also I'm involved in archaeology. There is a dig here called the Vero Man dig that was started. It was started recently, about 5 years ago, and it's an early man site 13,000 years ago, which is a fascinating thing, and I chair that. We've got a very active board, and we've been excavating for 4 years. It's a lot of fun, and it's been intriguing to be involved in. I'm also involved in archaeology in the Middle East and Jordan, and this is a sort of an extension of that, which is a lot of fun. I wonder if we've got some other questions. My wife Jody has a question. Okay.
Actually, this is a question from Charlie Pope.
Okay.
You know him?
Yep.
He says, if you were retired and comfortable, why in the world do you want to be on city council?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. If you don't know Charlie came in here with his wife on a sailboat and came down the inland waterways and ended up here in Vero and has started a very successful school for sailing youth. And I think he has something like 800 people that sail with him at the height of the season, and he's been really a major contributor to the activities in Vero for youth. The whole idea of being involved in the city council has been a lot of fun for me. I mean, the politics, the toxic side of the politics is not fun for anybody. But once you get in and you deal with the people that run the city, it's a real pleasure. We've got some very good people, very skilled people. They are committed to what they're doing and are very good at it, and it's very interesting to work on it. Also, there's some issues where you can really help or bring some of the brain power in this area to some of the problems that we've got and help solve them. There's a number of really good people that can help out with city issues, and I've been able to bring some in, and it's really rewarding to do so. So that's why I got involved initially, and that's why I'm running again. Thank you, Charlie, for the question.
Okay, so now your next question is from Nick Giesland. And Nick wants to know if there is, back to the electric again, if there is a partial sale, will that be a good thing for the residents of Vero Beach?
The details of that are not known right this second, because we really have to see the timing of that and see the pricing and everything like that. But generally speaking, it's the partial sale is a sale of of part of our customers to Florida Power and Light. It's about 10% of our customers, and it's for $30 million. So what happens is Vero Beach would end up with $30 million and would lose 10% of its clients. It still is obligated to take the same amount of power from from FMPA and from OUC. So there's a chance that, and a pretty good chance that, the cost would go up for our existing ratepayers. So there's a chance that that the effect of the short term of the partial sale would be an increase in rates for the citizens of Vero and the other ratepayers that we service. On the other side, we've been arguing about this whole Vero Electric sell, don't sell, the price is higher than Florida Power and Light, and all this has been very toxic for so long. And the biggest problem with selling, only part of it is that the argument still goes on. This toxic discussion would still go on, and that is a real problem. On top of it, the idea of selling a part of our system has to be approved by bond counsel and by bond insurers. And if we sell 10% of it, they would approve it. But if anybody else tried to have a partial sale, like Moorings or South Beach or something like that, I think the chances of it going through would be slim. And so it really means that only one group gets this deal and nobody else gets it. And so that's an additional problem. The rate and the cost is an issue. The fact that it's a partial sale and nobody else gets it is an issue, and the toxicity that remains is an issue. That's what my take is on the partial sale.
People have said that you are against the sale of the electric.
And I think that I've formed three opinions at different times about the sale. When I first got on the Finance Commission and I was looking at the budget for the city, and realized that we had 5 businesses that helped bring revenue into the city. The utility gave us $6 million a year, and the city has a general fund of $20 million. So the $6 million income from the utility supported a lot of the general fund that runs the police and our public works and the parks and the general operations of the city. So it was a wonderful asset to have that utility, and it kept our tax rate very low. In fact, if you look at the tax rates for for all the municipalities that report it within Florida, we were, from the top down, we were in the 400 and something range from the top. So we were one of the lowest rated taxpayers in the state, because of the fact that we had these businesses that gave us income and we didn't have to depend on property taxes. So my first impression was, wow, this utility really helps us keep taxes low for all the people that live in the city. So it was very positive to begin with. Second, once I got involved in trying to understand the utility and how it runs, and try to understand FMPA and OUC and how this all came together, I realized that I was not capable of really making decisions on behalf of a major utility. If FMPA's revenue is $750 million, and I'm a two-year council person and I'm going to serve on this board for a year, for me to get up to speed and understand how to run that business and be able to lead it, not just to say I understand what the decision was, but to say, wait a minute, we shouldn't do that, we should do this, or we should do that instead, because I really understand the utility business. That was never going to happen with FMPA or the utility business. So I said to myself, wait a minute, this is much too complicated for a council person like me that's rotating every couple of years to get involved in managing. So we ought to be able to manage this thing in some way. Let's get somebody else to come in and manage it. On the same side, at that particular time, there was a lot of discussion about selling it. And at that time, to exit FMPA, it would cost about $350 million to do so. Plus, to get out of OUC was about 40 million, I think. The contract's longer than it is presently. So I think it was about 30 million. And then to pay off our debt was another 30 million. So if you add those together, we're up to sort of $400 million our costs in selling it. And Florida Power and Light was only offering us 200 million. So we were going to have a loss situation. So the idea of being able to sell it at that time, a couple of years ago, was not possible. Now we have a transaction that'll work. That is, FMPA came down from our exit costs being 350 million down to 108 million. So that's a huge change, and that came about by a change in management of FMPA, and then a lot of pressure from Tallahassee put on FMPA to solve this problem. And now it's doable. So we end up with about 30 million in proceeds from the actual sale, plus we've got 27 million or so in cash. So we end up with 60 million, and then using that 60 million to offset the annual loss of 6 million from our utility is what it's all about. So I'm for the sale. The sale is only one part of this issue, though. It's what to do with the proceeds so that the local taxpayers aren't hurt, or the local residents aren't hurt by this loss of revenue. So it's a complicated set of knowledge to get into all this, and it takes a long time to get through it all. But I've gone through several different mindset changes my own self, and isn't this wonderful? To, oh my God, it's complicated, and now we can sell it, and it's reasonable, and the sale also is something that the citizens of Vero have voted on and said, please sell this. This toxic atmosphere we've got because of the sale is something we really want to get through and get past, because the city council hasn't been able to think about anything else other than the sale of the electric for a long time. So that's the long answer to a short question about, are you pro or anti?
Okay, so Tom LeBaff wants to know if taxes will go up when the electric is sold.
I can't tell you right this second, and it really is not going to be any one person's decision. This is a decision that has to be made by the city council that's going to be in place when this is sold, and they try to figure out what to do next. That's one obvious solution. That if their income from the Vero Beach Electric goes down by 6 million, increase the taxes by 6 million. And that's not what's going to happen, because there are some other offsets, but still, the taxing is one particular way to do it. I happen to think there's another way to do it, and very few municipalities have really gotten into it and tried to figure out how to do it. And I'm getting advice to it. I'm not completely sure it's going to work, but this is the idea of using the proceeds of the sale to top up the pension and then push the pension outside of the city so that it is no longer an expense to the city. Right now we're paying into the pensions about $6 million a year, and if we can possibly stop those payments by using the proceeds of the sale, that would be the best solution I can see. And there are probably some other solutions also. Some people have come up with some ways of earning income through solar or through websites and through natural gas and other ways of earning income that might be able to help the city offset the loss in revenue. But it's not something that's been studied yet. It's not something that people have gone into in any kind of detail. It's been, let's get it sold, and then let's think about what the consequences are later. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay, Holly Wilson is asking, who will manage and be accountable for the proceeds of the sale?
The city council is. There's no other party that makes those day-to-day decisions for the city. obviously, one of the major parties involved in this is Cindy Lawson, who is the finance director of the city, and she's a very bright lady, very smart, very thorough, very knowledgeable. She's been the finance person for several years. I'm going to say 5 or 6. I may be wrong. Maybe it's more like 8. But she came in and put in a whole new accounting system. She does all the budgeting. She's very accurate. She's very good, and she will have a very good idea of what to do with it. But there ought to be a lot of discussions about it, and then come together with a plan about what to do and execute it. Obviously, the Finance Commission is another group that can help. There's some very bright people on the committee, and they've already spent a bunch of time on it. Peter Gorey has been involved in a lot, and Glenn Bovant has been involved in a lot. I have been, not as a group, but individually we've been thinking about what to do. And so there's already been some thought about it, but it's not been a unified discussion, open discussion about what to do yet.
Dustin Tackett says, assuming the sale goes through, how will Vero Beach residents benefit from having you in a post-sale environment?
Not everybody said that I would be the best person to be in it after a sale. I feel that my financial background is deeper than most people's, and that trying to figure out what to do with the proceeds is something that I would very much like to be involved in. And I've been around the sort of financial area for 40 years, and I've seen lots of different things, and I've got a lot of different people I could call on to help. And so I think I could come up with a solution that some people couldn't come up with, or some people wouldn't have thought of. And this is not going to be the only thing that we are involved in over the next couple of years. I mean, there's some planning that has to go into the property. My background, I like to say, is planning. I like to look ahead and try financially to figure out how we're going to do the things we'd like to do so that we can be what we want to be. And the area that's at the foot of the 17th Street Bridge, those three pieces of property, the postal annex, the power plant, and then the sewer and water, at some particular time, maybe not in a quick sequence, but those properties are open, and that's a big part of a very important property that we ought to be looking at closely. Also, we've got the marina, we've got the airport, we've got the sewer and water, we've got the solid waste. All those things need planning, and I'd like to be very much involved with making sure that we've got good thoughts going forward and a vision for the future that we all can agree on. So I would, it's not just the proceeds at the sale, but there's a lot of other things that go on also that I'd like to be part of.
So I have a question for you about the stormwater utility. Are you in favor of it, and can you explain to us what it is?
The stormwater utility is a funding device for a method of helping out the lagoon. It's used by several municipalities around Florida that have stormwater issues and live near and are situated near the lagoon. In essence, when it rains hard, and it rains quite a bit, the rain carries debris and pollutants into the lagoon. And what you want to be able to do is catch the rain and clean it, and catch the debris and pull it aside before it gets into the lagoon, because those pollutants hurt the lagoon. And this is something that we've been looking at for a while, and we came up with a way to do this, and it's basically a copy of other cities the way they do it. And we were trying to get ahead of the restrictions that are coming on from the state. The state's about to legislate stormwater issues and pollutant levels in the lagoon, and this gets ahead of that, so that we're not going to all of a sudden be behind the 8 ball and be forced by the state to do it. And it's really it's a monthly fee that we charge people who have impervious or areas of their property that is that's waterproof, so that the water falls on it and runs off and then ends up in the lagoon. So individuals with driveways that are hard, or roofs that are hard, or big parking lots, or things like that, you know, the malls and churches or whatever that have big parking lots, those people cause problems for the lagoon. And so right now the concept is to raise $900,000 a year, which means that individual payers pay about $5 a month. That's residents about $5 a month, and companies or industries or malls or something would pay more. The city would pay, but everybody that's got impervious property would pay. It's not just for-profit companies, or it's not just public companies, or not just individuals. It's the city would pay part of it, churches would pay, companies would pay, everybody would pay. And so this idea is to help the lagoon. And to me, it's an obvious thing to do. And if we don't do it and get ahead of it, it's going to be legislated toward us anyway. So it's something we ought to do.
So I have a last question for you. How do you feel about the 2-year versus a 3-year term for city council members?
I much prefer the 3-year period. For me, getting into the seat of the city council, I had the opportunity, like quite a few other people, to be involved with the city beforehand. So I was on the finance commission, and I got to understand the finances to some degree. And then running up into this, before I got on the city council, I spent probably 6 months running around, as I described before, running around and trying to get my hands around this electric stuff. And it's just a very complicated city. To understand the sewer and water and what should happen with that going forward, to understand that we do solid waste, that's the trash pickup, to go and look at the airport and to understand the size of the airport, what it does, what it doesn't do, what the regs are that FAA imposes on them, to understand the police and the public works and all the little pieces that fit together and end up in this budget that we negotiate every year, is very complicated. And yes, you can say, well, you ought to study it ahead of time, but it takes a long time to get your hands around it. And maybe it takes me longer than some people, or maybe I'd like to really get into it deeper than some people. I don't know, but it in 2 years I didn't feel like I could really contribute as much as I would have liked to, and so the 3rd year would really be helpful.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate doing this. If you, I'm glad you listened. If you did listen, and maybe next time, if you didn't listen, tell your friends, and you can listen to this tape. It'll be on Facebook, as I understand it. And if you've got some other questions, I'll be glad to answer them by email. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.